On the battlefields of ancient Egypt, archers were the first to strike and often the first to die. They weren't honored as the pharaohs they battled for. Their victories were not etched in stone. They were shadows in the sand, their fingers blistered from years of brutal repetition. These archers faced unimaginable hardships, long marches through the desert and training that punished weakness. Their arrows were tipped with flint or bronze, and they were made not to frighten, but to kill. A single mistake could mean death. Regardless of everything, archers were the backbone of Egypt's military force. In siege warfare, open desert battles and ambushes, they shaped the outcomes of history without ever being remembered by name. This life was not glamorous. It was painful and brutal. So, let's dive into the brutal life of an ancient Egyptian archer. To understand how brutal their lives were, one must start at the core, who these men were, and how they were shaped for war. Who were the archers of ancient Egypt? In ancient Egypt, archers served as crucial tools for warfare. The Egyptian military force had a large number of archers. Most were not exceptional fighters or experienced soldiers. They were ordinary individuals, farmers, laborers, and peasants taken from the Nile Valley during times of conflict. With little notice, they were expected to exchange plows for bows, houses for tents, and family for Pharaoh. Certain archers, nonetheless, were part of specialized units. Among the most dreaded were the Magi. They were Nubian warriors from the south, renowned for their skills in tracking and combat. With time, the Magi transformed into a respected paramilitary unit, acting as both desert scouts and exceptional archers. Their abilities were lethal, but their lives were equally tough. Archers participated in many of Egypt's most significant military campaigns under pharaohs such as Thutmose III, Seti I, and Ramses II. Their task was to unleash barrages of arrows, disrupting enemy formations before the infantry or chariots swept in. In siege warfare, they were the first in reducing enemy numbers. In open combat, they were the line between victory and massacre. Despite all this, they were rarely honored. Statues weren't built in their remembrance, tombs lacked their names. The honor was given to kings and generals, and the wounds and pain remained with the archer. Their story started in obscurity, and for many, it ended there as well. Brutal training from childhood. In ancient Egypt, the journey to becoming an archer frequently started not with a choice, but with necessity. Many boys born into rural families were taught to hunt from a young age. The bow wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool for survival. It was used to bring down birds, antelopes, and wild cattle. But the accuracy of the shot was the main point. Accuracy meant food on the table. As time passed, the hunting instinct became the foundation of war. However, when war arrived, the ability was tested to its utmost. In times of military growth, like during Thutmose III or Ramses II's reign, boys as young as 12 were recruited into government-operated training facilities, and there the violence started. Recruits were trained in the blazing desert heat. Bows crafted from acacia or yew were heavy, and pulling them repeatedly strained muscles, tendons, and skin. Rough fingers and torn palms were signs of progress. If you're weak, it's not going to end well, because weakness was met with brutal punishments. Instructors maintained order using whips. Targets were placed farther and farther away. Recruits had to shoot from horseback, crouched positions, or behind obstacles. If the soldier failed to strike his target under stress, he was seen as a risk. Ecological warfare was also present. Recruits were separated from their families. They were told repeatedly that failure would not only cost them their lives, it would doom their villages to invasion too. Fear was part of the training process. Despite the Magi's reputation for expertise, their training was harsh. They lived in remote desert camps, patrolling dangerous terrain while shooting on the move. They weren't just competitors, they were survival units. By the time they reached adulthood, an archer had experienced more pain and stress than many would face in their entire lifetime. In Egypt, war didn't allow anyone to be ready. Life on campaign. When training ended, the real horror started. Military campaigns in ancient Egypt were harsh trials of stamina, suffering, and resilience. Archers marched hundreds of kilometers over rough landscapes like deserts, riverbanks, and rugged valleys. They also had to carry their bows, quivers, and frequently their own supplies. Foot soldiers, including archers, were packed tightly into slow-moving columns that could stretch for miles. The heat was unbearable. As temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius, men collapsed from heat stroke or dehydration well before any arrows were fired. Water was distributed in limited supplies. The food consisted of simple items: flatbread, dates, and dried meat. Different diseases rapidly spread among the ranks like malaria and dysentery, and infections from unhealed wounds were constant dangers. Then came the battles. Archers were typically positioned at the back or on the side, but that didn't guarantee security. Their instructions were clear: shatter the enemy's front lines with a storm of arrows. They shot in quick bursts, focusing not on single targets but on overwhelming enemy formations. The battle's tension was deafening. War shouts, rhythmic drumming, and the release of countless bowstrings at once. Fumes from blazing chariots and siege towers frequently filled the air. Many archers had to keep firing while arrows, spears, or sling stones rained back toward them. There was no break, no mercy. In ambushes, archers were the first to attack, and in retreats, they were the last to exit. They knew a delay in reloading, a snapped bowstring, or a stumble could lead to death. Now the real question is, what if they made it through the battle? Was there any comfort after that? The answer is simply no. There was no comfort waiting, no cozy beds and no medals for them. But there was one thing: the march to the next battle. Each campaign tested the limits of the human body and broke many of them. Weapons and gear. Do you know what was the Egyptian archer's strongest ally as well as his heaviest burden? The bow. There were two main varieties: the basic self-bow, crafted from a single piece of wood such as acacia, and the composite bow, a more lethal and advanced weapon that came from Asia. The composite bow, typically curved and layered with wood, sinew, and horn, provided greater power and distance, occasionally reaching as far as 250 meters. However, it had drawbacks. It was heavy, delicate in moist environments, and extremely difficult to draw. Only the most skilled and experienced archers could use it proficiently. Every archer had a quiver containing 20 to 40 arrows with flint, obsidian, or bronze tips. These arrows weren't cheap. Each had to be handcrafted and properly balanced. It was common to lose them amid the chaos of the battle, but the resupply was never guaranteed. Archers often collected the arrows from the dead, whether it was a friend or an enemy. The proactive gear was insufficient. Many archers wore basic linen kilts, possibly a leather chest strap or padded vest, along with a headscarf for sun protection. Helmets were uncommon. Shields were even more uncommon. Movement was prioritized over safety. Precision was everything on the battleground. Missed shots weren't just a loss, they could lead to death. Archers were taught to assess wind, distance, arc, and speed, all while facing stress. Their fingers were blistered from repeated draws. Their shoulders arched from the strain of ongoing pressure. Bowstrings broke, arrowheads curved. Minor failure resulted in losing tempo, and tempo was essential for survival. Every piece of gear had to work perfectly. The individual responsible had to be sharper than the bronze tip on his arrow. In battle, no one paused for an archer to fix his mistake. Hunger, heat, and the psychological toll. Beyond the arrows and formations, the Egyptian archer confronted a much more personal battle. One fought inside the mind and body. The life brought by a campaign was harsh. Food rations were minimal and monotonous. Thin barley loaves, onions, and dried fish. If supply routes failed, hunger ensued. Troops frequently had to forage in enemy territory or survive on whatever they could capture or steal. Minimal food often led to malnutrition. Malnutrition weakened physical strength and blurred focus. For an archer, that meant trembling hands and missed shots. The heat was relentless. Marching beneath the Egyptian sun in linen garments was unbearable. Daily threats included blisters, sunburns, dehydration, and heat stroke. Numerous archers fell before they could arrive at the battlefield. But the worst damage was often invisible. Archers stood on the periphery of war, witnessing its devastation. They watched friends skewered by enemy weapons or crashed by chariots. They shot arrows into groups of approaching soldiers, listening to their screams echo across dry valleys. In contrast to hand-to-hand fighters, archers had the opportunity to witness the impact of their actions, sometimes from a distance and sometimes at close range. Sleep came in fits. Memories of the battlefield clung like dust. A few archers shattered. Others became resolute, but no one returned home the same. There's no word for post-traumatic stress in the ancient Egyptian language, but its shadow followed many who survived. Even the strongest warrior couldn't escape what he carried inside: glory, recognition, or total oblivion. Victory didn't guarantee recognition. For most Egyptian archers, victory in combat was greeted with silence. The pharaohs claimed the glory. Their names were carved into temple walls, and their battles were preserved in hieroglyphics. Generals, charioteers, and senior officers were granted land, titles, and wealth. But the archer, The individual whose arrow tipped the balance was often nameless. From time to time, top archers or leaders of archer troops received rewards. Some received necklaces of honor or were offered positions in the palace guard. Only a small number were buried with modest tributes or mentioned in inscriptions. However, these were rare cases. Many returned to their villages with wounds and nothing else. Some were unable to continue cultivating their lands. Others bore wounds that never healed, like hurt shoulders, impaired vision, and broken fingers. Their sacrifice faded with the breeze along the Nile. The military didn't offer retirement benefits. No ceremonies took place, no poems, no statues. Nevertheless, they went back to work when called, again and again. This was the irony of the Egyptian archer, essential to every victory but rarely remembered by history. They were men who fought in silence and returned in shadows. Legacy of the Forgotten Warriors. The legacy of ancient Egyptian archers is not inscribed in majestic structures or royal manuscripts, but it remains in the dust. Their bows lie shattered in forgotten graves. Arrowheads found on ancient battlefields quietly tell the stories of the soldiers who used them. These fighters contributed to the development of Egypt's military strength. Their names are seldom recalled by history. They were crucial in every campaign, from protecting the Nile to penetrating deep into enemy territory under pharaohs such as Thutmose III and Ramses II. Their volleys changed the outcome of battles. Their proficiency with the bow instilled fear in Egypt. Their influence spread well beyond Egypt. Methods created by Egyptian archers, particularly those of Magi and desert patrols, influenced military forces in the Near East. They served as models for military tactics throughout ancient civilizations, but even then, most died in obscurity. Today, historians and archaeologists are gradually revealing their story. Little by little, the quiet fighters are emerging into the open, not via fame, but through perseverance. Their story is not about gods or wealth, it's about sacrifice, survival, and forgotten strength. The ancient Egyptian archer was never meant to be remembered, yet his struggle still echoes through time. Behind every empire stands the forgotten. Like this journey into the brutal life of an ancient Egyptian archer? Do tell us in the comments. Share and subscribe for more untold stories.